Hi, we have been reading with concern about the increasing rate of suicide around the world. In addition, many people consider suicide as a function of mental illness. But there are many other factors other than mental illness which can lead to suicide, and we looked at many of the factors in the last episode. As a continuation of that discussion, let us peep into some historical aspects this week. When did the phenomena of suicide start? Is it recent in human history or has it been there for many centuries? Welcome to Mindscape Matters, a channel to discuss mental health and more. I am Dr. Mohanraj, a consultant psychiatrist based in Chennai, and I'll be with you as we explore the various facets of mental health. If we go far back in history to the time that humans have not evolved, we find that our precursors, the primates, didn't take their own life. For that matter, most animal species do not die by suicide. It's something that human beings indulge in. Once human evolved, we don't have evidence about suicide in the prehistoric period. We had to wait till the spoken and written language evolved, from which epics and other religious texts were born. Ramayana and Mahabharata, two of our great epics, document many suicides. It just goes on to show that suicides were known to occur at the time of Valmiki and Vyasa. Religious texts of all the three major religions have multiple references to suicide. Most religions condemn suicide and advise their followers not to pursue that path. Some religious texts have suggested that the body of the person who took his or her life is not entitled for a religious ceremony and should not be given a proper burial or cremation. But at times, followers of religion have glorified suicide. If a person takes his life in the process of upholding or protecting his or her religion, people praise them and call them martyrs. Then there are religiously sanctioned suicide or ways of voluntarily ending one's life. Fasting until death is a religiously sanctioned practice in Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism. In Hinduism, it's called Prayopavesa. For example, Parikshit had practiced this. Some other call it by different names. There is a practice called Jiva Samadhi, where a person would fast until death and in addition tell their followers to bury them while they are fasting. In Buddhism, the practice of fasting until death is called Soku Shinbutsu. Many Buddhist monks have practiced this in ancient Japan, China, and Tibet. In Jainism, fasting until death is called Salekana, Samtara, or Samadhi Marana. Elaborate guidelines are mentioned in the above three religious practices as to how the ritual should be observed. Historically, Chandragupta Maurya and his teacher Bhadrabahu had observed Salekana. In early days, only monks were observing it. In later years, family persons also started observing Salekana. There were controversies whether Salekana was suicide or not. The Rajasthan High Court had banned the practice for some time. The case was argued as right to live versus freedom to practice one's religion. Justice T.K. Tukol's eloquent book, Salekana is not suicide, was quoted during the trial. The Supreme Court stayed the decision of Rajasthan High Court and thus lifted the ban on Salekana. Perhaps inspired by these practices, kings of ancient Tamil kingdoms observed fasting until death in a practice called Vadakirithal or Vadakku Nokki Irithal. A place is chosen and the person sits facing north and fasts until death. The motivations are mostly religious like guilt or renunciation, but other reasons also existed. For example, when Kopparum Cholan found out that both his sons were fighting to get the throne while he was still alive, he decided to end his life by Vadakirithal. his friend Pisirandayar also fasted along with him and ended his life. During the era of the kingdoms, there were other non religious factors for suicide. We look at them. When kingdoms go to war with each other, they start with a human sacrifice, and some soldiers volunteer to be the person to be sacrificed. Second, during the war, if the bodyguards fail to protect the king or important members assigned to them, they kill themselves to mark their failure. The third is, if the enemy is about to win, many people had chosen to end their life rather than be taken as prisoner of war. This has been there in many kingdoms. The most important example is Hara-kiri in Japan. At later years, fasting until death was practiced for political reasons. There are instances of fasting until death as a way of protest against the rulers. Subsequently, fasting until death was also employed as a way of pressurizing the rulers to accept one's demands. Gandhiji popularized this form of protest and agitation by observing fasts on many occasions. In later years, many political activists followed this. The first linguistic state of India, Andhra Pradesh, was formed as a result of the hunger protest by Poti Sriramulu. Ironically, Andhra Pradesh was bifurcated by another fast. Any discussion on history of suicide is not complete without examining the contribution of Emile Durkheim, a French sociologist. Now, some of you might wonder, suicide is a personal decision made and executed by an individual. And what has society got to do with it? Durkheim, in his book Suicide, written in 1897, talked about societal factors that can influence suicide. He took two aspects of society. One is integration. How well is the person integrated? Is it just the enough proportion, or is the person less integrated or extremely integrated? So people who are least integrated with society would feel they are like islands, and the incidence of suicide is high in that group. If you go to the other extreme, people who are extremely integrated with their society are willing to die for their society. It's like they are willing to die for their religion, die for their kingdom. So Durkheim called this group as egoistic suicide. That is, they are very less integrated. And the people who are more integrated, extremely integrated, he called them as altruistic suicides. Durkheim took another aspect of society, that is regulation. How regulated is this society? Are there rules? Are there norms? So here again, he looked at, are the rules and norms at the right proportion? Are they very less to the point there is no rule and regulation? Or there are too many rules? So if you come to this extent where there are extremely less rules, less regulations, he called it as anomy. Anomy is basically a state of normlessness. There are no norms as to how to conduct oneself in society, how to behave, how to talk, and as a result, what to expect from others. So in a place, in a society where there is anomy, the rates of suicide will be high, and Durkheim called it as anomic suicides. On the other hand, if there are too many regulations, too many rules, like in a prison, a person can't do anything out of their own will, they have to follow all the rules, the levels of suicides are again high. Durkheim called it as fatalistic suicides. In later years, there were many criticism about his theories, but we need to keep in mind this book was written in 1897, and we need to view this through that lens. Moreover, many of his theories like poor integration and anomy are still relevant today because at this date, loneliness is one of the major factors for suicide. When I say loneliness, it's not about being alone. A person can be alone in an island and still feel connected. On the other hand, a person can be in a classroom where there are 70 others and still feel lonely. And loneliness, as I said, is connected to suicide. And what is your guess about who is most lonely these days? Is it adolescents, adults, or the elderly? Many of us might have guessed it's the elderly, but research shows it's the adolescents. Adolescents are feeling more and more lonely compared to previous years. And it's reflected in the increasing number of suicide among adolescents, a phenomena called as ungraying of suicide. In the next few episodes, let's look at some more factors that can contribute to suicide and ways of preventing them. If you like this video, please tell 4 of your friends. Tell them there is a Tamil version also. Stay tuned because Mindscape matters. Bye.